You've moved from reaction to authorship, from surviving the moment to designing your direction, from bracing for impact to choosing your trajectory. And people who are still living in reaction mode don't know how to relate to that. They sense the gap. They feel it in the room before they can name it. They see it in your eyes. That distance between who you were and who you are becoming. Not arrogance. Alignment. Not superiority. Sovereignty. You're not trying to prove anything anymore. You're not trying to win arguments that were never about truth. You're not trying to convince people who benefit from misunderstanding you. And that's exactly why your presence speaks louder than explanations ever could. They may never understand what happened to you. They may reduce it to a phase, a mood, a loss of softness, a personality shift, a season, a defense mechanism. Let them. You know the truth. The truth is you stopped lying to yourself about what hurt you, about what drained you, about what you were tolerating in the name of peace. You stopped spiritualizing exhaustion. You stopped romanticizing endurance. You stopped calling survival strength and collapse weakness. And once honesty enters the system, everything rearranges itself. Your eyes changed because your priorities changed. Your silence changed because your standards changed. Your presence changed because you stopped fragmenting yourself for acceptance. And this isn't the end of that evolution. It's the middle. Because the more you stand rooted in this version of yourself, the more the world adjusts around you. Some doors will close without explanation. Some conversations will never resume. Some people will swear you've changed too much, that you're not the same anymore, that they miss the old you, and you won't chase any of it. You won't defend yourself against nostalgia that only existed because you were self-abandoning. You won't negotiate your growth with people who only felt safe when you were smaller. You'll keep walking, steady, clear, internally anchored, knowing that what you're becoming doesn't need consensus, knowing that alignment doesn't require applause, knowing that peace doesn't need witnesses, and that quiet certainty, that calm refusal to return to who you were just to make others comfortable, is only just beginning. Because once you cross this threshold, there is no version of you that can convincingly pretend anymore. There is no way to unsee what you've seen, no way to unknow what your body has learned, no way to unknow the cost of silence, the price of shrinking, the tax of emotional availability in spaces that never intended to reciprocate. You feel it now, don't you? That subtle but permanent shift inside your chest. Not excitement, not fear. Certainty. A groundedness that doesn't need adrenaline to validate itself. A steadiness that doesn't require chaos to feel real. You've stopped asking yourself who you need to be for the room. You've stopped scanning faces for approval before speaking your truth. You've stopped rehearsing explanations for choices that no longer require permission. And the world noticed the moment you stopped explaining. That's when the noise changed. At first it was curiosity. People leaning in, studying you like a puzzle they used to solve easily, but suddenly can't. They ask harmless questions with sharp edges hidden underneath. How are you really? What's going on with you lately? You seem different. They're not asking because they care. They're asking because the old access is gone, and they don't know why. Then comes confusion. They replay old interactions in their minds, searching for the moment they lost control, the joke that didn't land, the guilt that didn't work, the silence you didn't break, the reassurance you didn't provide. And finally comes discomfort. Because nothing terrifies stagnant people more than someone who no longer needs them to stay regulated. You've become emotionally self-sustaining, and that's the part no one talks about. Healing doesn't just make you softer, it makes you independent. It makes you stable without witnesses. It makes you grounded without applause. You no longer outsource your stability. You don't need someone else's reaction to confirm your reality. You don't need agreement to trust your perception. You don't need validation to authorize your experience. And once that happens, manipulation starves. You can see it now. When someone tries to provoke you, they say something loaded. They pause, waiting for the old reaction. They watch your face for movement. They scan your tone for shifts. They wait for the familiar emotional supply. And when it doesn't come, something flickers behind their eyes. Panic. Not because you were cruel, not because you were aggressive, but because their power was never in what they said. It was in how reliably you responded. It was in your predictability. It was in your accessibility. It was in your emotional availability. And you've broken that contract. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with an exit speech or a confrontation, but completely. You simply stopped participating. You simply stopped offering yourself as the emotional infrastructure for dynamics that were never reciprocal. And that quiet withdrawal, that clean exit from patterns that no longer serve, is more destabilizing than any argument ever could be. This is why your silence feels different now. It's not absence. It's containment. You're not holding things in. You're holding yourself together. There's a difference. You've learned that not every thought deserves a voice. Not every emotion deserves an audience. Not every conflict deserves oxygen. Not every invitation deserves acceptance. And that discernment, that quiet filtering of what gets access to your time, your energy, your nervous system, your inner world, is what turned you into something unfamiliar. Not hardened, not detached, not closed. Discerned, regulated, grounded, self-led. And to people who relied on your over-explaining, your over-giving, your over-functioning, your over-accommodating, your over-understanding, your over-forgiving, that looks like distance. It looks like coldness. It looks like rejection. It looks like loss. But what it actually is alignment. What it actually is self-trust. What it actually is the end of self-abandonment. You didn't lose your warmth. You stopped giving it to places that froze it. You didn't lose your softness. You stopped letting it be exploited. You didn't lose your heart. You stopped offering it to dynamics that treated it like a resource instead of a living thing. You didn't become harder. You became clearer. You didn't become distant. You became boundaried. You didn't become unrecognizable. You became real. And that's why people feel unsettled around you now. Because authenticity without apology destabilizes systems built on compliance. Calm without explanation disrupts dynamics built on reaction. Stability without permission threatens structures that rely on your self-doubt. You are no longer easy to manipulate, not because you're guarded, but because you're grounded. Not because you're defensive, but because you're sovereign. Not because you're closed, but because you're contained. And here's the part no one prepares you for. Growth like this isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fireworks or validation or standing ovations. It comes with quiet exits, with unanswered messages, with invitations you decline without explanation, with conversations that never happen again, with spaces that feel strange because you no longer contort yourself to belong. It comes with loneliness at first. Not the lonely kind, but the empty space kind, the recalibration kind. The something old is gone, and something new hasn't fully arrived yet, kind. And then, slowly, without fanfare, it comes with peace, with internal quiet, with emotional stability that doesn't require anyone else's participation. with mornings that don't start in dread, with nights that don't end in rumination, with a nervous system that no longer lives in anticipation of impact, with a body that finally feels like a safe place to exist. And that's when you realize, this wasn't just a personality shift. This was a structural reorganization of your entire inner world. You're not trying to be understood anymore. You're not trying to be liked anymore. You're not trying to be chosen anymore. You're not trying to be palatable anymore. You're not trying to be manageable anymore. You're not trying to be acceptable anymore. You're trying to be aligned. You're trying to be honest. You're trying to be whole. And that's why your presence feels heavier now. Not oppressive, but weighted, anchored, stable, real. You carry yourself differently because you're no longer carrying everyone else. You listen differently because you're no longer scanning for threats. You speak differently because you're no longer rehearsing survival. You move differently because you're no longer negotiating your right to exist in your own body. You rest differently because you're no longer performing peace while living in chaos. And people can feel that, even if they can't name it, even if they misinterpret it, even if they resent it, even if they miss the version of you that was easier to access, even if they mourn the version of you that made their lives simpler at the expense of your complexity. And the truth is, some people will never meet this version of you. Some relationships were only possible in your self-abandonment. Some dynamics only functioned when you were uncertain. Some bonds only existed because you were overgiving. Some connections were built on your emotional availability rather than mutuality. And when you remove yourself from that role, the relationship collapses. Not because you failed, but because the structure was never sustainable. That's not loss. That's clarity. That's filtration. That's alignment. That's evolution doing what it does best, rearranging your life to match your nervous system, your boundaries, your truth, your capacity, your standards, your self-respect. And it doesn't always look beautiful from the outside. It looks quiet. It looks uneventful. It looks uneventful to people addicted to chaos. But inside, it feels like air. It feels like space. It feels like relief. It feels like returning to yourself after years of emotional displacement. You're no longer emotionally available to chaos, and chaos feels that withdrawal like a personal rejection. The people who once thrived on your reactions now feel irrelevant. The ones who fed on your self-doubt feel unseen. The ones who depended on your over-functioning feel abandoned. They call it distance. They call it coldness. They call it change. But it isn't any of those things. It's alignment. You stopped bending your internal compass to fit other people's expectations. You stopped mistaking discomfort for danger and familiarity for safety. And the moment you stopped confusing those things, your life began reorganizing itself. Some connections dissolved without conflict. Some conversations ended mid-sentence. Some people disappeared without closure, and for the first time, you didn't chase any of it, because you finally learned what pain had to teach you. Not everything that leaves is a loss. Not everything that stays deserves you. And not every ending requires an explanation. You're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You're more afraid of misunderstanding yourself again. That's why your eyes don't flinch anymore. They remember what it costs to abandon your own knowing. They remember the nights you shrank yourself to survive rooms that never deserved you, and they refuse to go back. People feel that refusal. They sense the finality in it. You're not experimenting with this version of yourself. You're not trying it on. You're not waiting to see how it's received. You've moved past asking, "Is this okay?" and into, "This is who I am." And that's why the dynamic has flipped. They used to observe you from comfort. Now they observe you from uncertainty. They used to feel larger when you doubted yourself. Now they feel smaller when you don't. They used to assume you'd always return. Now they're realizing you're not looking back. And that realization lands differently for everyone. Some feel relief. They no longer have to perform around you. They meet you where you are, or fade with grace. Others feel threatened. They escalate. They push boundaries disguised as concern. They test limits disguised as jokes. And you notice without reacting. That's the mastery. You don't punish. You don't expose. You don't retaliate. You simply withdraw access. And it turns out access was the currency all along. Your energy was the fuel. Your attention was the permission. Your emotional availability was the leverage. Now that it's regulated, now that it's selective, the entire structure collapses. People who relied on your endless understanding now call you selfish. People who benefited from your silence now accuse you of distance. People who never listened now complain. And you don't explain. You don't rush to correct the narrative because you've learned another hard truth. People don't misunderstand you by accident. They misunderstand you in ways that protect their version of themselves. And you no longer feel responsible for maintaining that illusion. You let the discomfort stand. You let the silence do its work. You let people sit with the consequences of a version of you that no longer negotiates. And the part that surprises even you is that it doesn't feel heavy. It feels light. You didn't lose yourself by becoming this way. You found yourself by stopping the performance. Your laughter is quieter now, but more real. Your presence is calmer, but heavier with meaning. Your relationships are fewer, but cleaner. And the solitude that once terrified you now feels like home, because solitude isn't loneliness when you trust yourself. It's sanctuary. You've become your own witness, your own regulator, your own anchor. And from that place, you choose instead of cling. That's why when someone walks away now, it doesn't shatter you. It clarifies. When someone misunderstands you, it doesn't consume you. It informs. When someone tries to provoke you, it doesn't hook you. It reveals. You see patterns faster. You hear what isn't being said. You recognize dynamics before they tighten. Not because you're guarded, but because you're aware. And awareness changes everything. You don't need to announce this evolution. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to give speeches about boundaries or healing. Your life is saying it quietly, in the way you pause before responding, in the way you leave rooms early, in the way you stop chasing energy that doesn't meet you halfway, in the way your eyes no longer ask for permission to exist. People will keep commenting. They'll keep wondering. They'll keep trying to name what they feel around you. Let them. You're not here to be categorized. You're not here to be digestible. You're not here to be reduced into a version that makes others comfortable. You're here to be congruent. And congruence, living in alignment with what you know to be true, is disruptive in a world built on performance. You're no longer reacting to life. You're responding to it. You're no longer surviving the moment. You're shaping direction. And this isn't the peak. It's the foundation. Because the more you stabilize here, the more you refuse to abandon yourself, the more your world reorganizes around that truth. New connections will feel unfamiliar at first, healthier, slower, mutual. New opportunities will require presence instead of proof. New versions of you will emerge that don't recognize the old survival patterns, and every step forward will quietly confirm what your eyes already know. You didn't lose yourself. You didn't become less human. You didn't harden into something cold. You became real. And real doesn't beg. Real doesn't chase. Real doesn't explain itself to people who aren't listening. Real stands. And you're still standing, still evolving, still shedding what no longer fits, still becoming something that doesn't need to announce its arrival. Because this story, this transformation, isn't finished yet. It's only just learned how to move without asking for permission. If this landed, don't scroll past it like a nice thought or background noise. Sit with it. Let it settle. Let it confront the parts of you that have been surviving instead of living. Let it clarify what you've been tolerating, what you've been carrying, and what you're finally ready to release. Let it remind you of who you're becoming, not someday, not eventually, but right now, and what you are no longer available for, no longer willing to shrink for, no longer willing to negotiate with just to keep the peace. Because this isn't inspiration, this is recognition. This is your nervous system hearing truth and going quiet in that unmistakable way that means something real just landed. And if you're ready to keep building this version of yourself, the regulated one, the grounded one, the self-led one who doesn't outsource their worth, stability, or identity, then stay here. Subscribe. Walk with me. Not for motivation spikes that fade by morning. Not for temporary clarity that collapses the moment life applies pressure. But for structural change. For realignment. For becoming someone who doesn't just understand themselves intellectually, but trusts themselves somatically, emotionally, relationally, and lives from that place without apology. This space isn't about becoming louder. It's about becoming clearer. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about no longer needing to. It's for people who are done abandoning themselves for approval, done contorting for connection, done performing wellness while living in exhaustion. It's for people who want lives that feel clean inside, not impressive on the outside, but honest in the body, stable in the mind, and peaceful in the nervous system. It's for people who are ready to stop reacting to life and start authoring it. And if you felt seen by this, not entertained, not impressed, but recognized, share it with someone who's quietly outgrowing their old life and doesn't yet have language for what's happening inside them. Someone who feels different, but can't explain why. Someone who knows they can't go back, but doesn't yet know what forward fully looks like. You might be the bridge between their confusion and their clarity. You might be the first moment they realize they're not broken. They're changing. Because this isn't content. This isn't motivation. This isn't noise for your feed. This is calibration. This is nervous system truth. This is identity realignment. So stay. Not for me, for you. For the person you're becoming. For the life that feels unfamiliar because it's finally honest. This isn't the peak. This is the foundation. And you're just getting started.